And this is Real Estate Underground.
Greetings and salutations, Real Estate Undergrounders. This is Ed Matthews with the Real Estate Underground. Thank you so much for joining us today. Today is actually a fairly unique show because we're talking real estate investing for sure. But the gentleman that has kindly lent his time to the show is one of the heavy hitters down in a place that I absolutely love, Charlotte, North Carolina, and the area, as well as I think you're in the DMV as well, at least to the Maryland part of it, right? So Trystan McNeill with Heigh Capital Group, and I think you're associated with EXP as well. Welcome to the show, and thank you for your time today. It's good to see you, my friend.
Yeah, absolutely, Ed, and I appreciate you having me on the show, and I'm ready to talk through, all things real estate.
So for those of you that are watching this on YouTube, there's a beautiful picture of the Golden Gate Bridge behind Trystan, but you're actually based in North Carolina, right?
Yeah, that's correct. And I actually just recently traveled to San Francisco a couple months ago. The wife and I were celebrating an anniversary. So actually, it's been more than a couple months now. I think about it because we caught a San Fran 49ers game and we went to Napa out there.
Well played.
And it was her first time out there. Yeah. So
yeah, I used to work out there, and it's one of my favorite places on earth. And I always told my wife, if I ever disappeared or ran away, I'd be easy to find. I'd be out there. So welcome to the show. And so for those folks that may not have come across you on LinkedIn or wherever else, that's where we met. But why don't you talk about your background and how you got to the position you're in now?
Yeah, absolutely. So I actually originally in 2012, I graduated from the University of North Carolina at Charlotte. Like a lot of folks, was kind of in that mindset of, let me graduate, let me, kind of find the job or the career that aligns with my degree, which was in finance, with a concentration in risk management and insurance. And from there, I actually landed a position with Wells Fargo in their audit associate program. So I was actually in audit risk management for quite some time. Did various positions, whether it was consulting, whether it was with public accounting and things of that nature. And come about 2017, beginning of 2018, you kind of get stuck in that lull. And I was like, I'm not happy with what I'm doing. So I actually up and quit my job that I was working at in 2017 and actually started contract consulting to kind of figure out what I want to do in between that. First quarter of that year, it was good. Didn't really have a boss to report to, et cetera. But at the same time, I still wasn't fulfilled. And I remembered at the time, a couple of years ago, I was interested in real estate. And so I was like, well, you know what? Let me do that, right? Let me go try that. So I went ahead, registered for the real estate class, failed it the first time, actually, had to retake the class, ended up getting my license within about 6 months after that. I started actually in the residential brokerage space. And even when I got into residential, I always knew that I wanted to be in commercial, but wasn't sure kind of what route I wanted to take. So in between that time, as I was learning the residential side of business, I actually enrolled myself back into school in some classes and started learning commercial real estate. I started learning actually the development side of things and the economic side, but I never actually wanted to step into an analyst role. So, in between there, I was trying to figure out, well, how do I get into brokerage? The brokerage that I was at, the owner at the time just happened to have a family member that was in commercial real estate, worked for one of the big box firms, but wanted to still keep some independence. So they started a commercial arm at that firm at the time. And we actually had partners with some folks from some big box firms who actually taught us the training and the lay of the land in the commercial space. So I was actually able to do a fast track training on brokerage, which, I'll be forever grateful for. And then over the last year, my partner and I, we actually transitioned to another brokerage that just was a little bit better fitting where we're currently at now for our business model and kind of where we want to go forward in the business.
I gotcha. Okay. Well, hey, congratulations. That's a hell of a journey.
Yeah, thank you.
It's interesting that, I come from technology, you come from finance. There's so many different people with so many different backgrounds in this industry. And, one of the things that I've realized, I was at MM5 down in Florida. I guess that was earlier this year. And, one of the guys that, one of the people that spoke there was Bo Berry, who you may have come across in your travels, because he's pretty active. I think he's further south. I think he's based in Florida. But, one of the things that I learned there was, first off, how I go to conferences to learn how people who are better at this business than I am, how they operate, right? So that I can get a little smarter.
Yeah, absolutely.
And one of the things that Bo had said, and it really stuck with me, was all of the A players that he knows in the commercial real estate space work with brokers. Yes, they do direct mail, and they try to create off market deals. Yes, they do digital marketing, but the big guys, every single one of them has trusted relationships with brokers, and so that was one of the reasons why I wanted to have you come in to the show, because it's something that we're really looking at in terms of how to create awareness, build the relationships, ultimately build trust, and then hopefully at some point earn the right to do business with guys like you. And so I wanted to pick your brain, which is why I invited you on the show. And the cool part about a podcast is that although I think you would return my phone call, a lot of the folks that we have on here, I get to do the same thing and pick their brains, and I learn from you, and hopefully the audience learns from you. But you might, if Ed Matthews lit up your mobile phone and you looked at it, and you might not take my call, but you'll come on my podcast, so that's cool.
Yeah, and I think it just depends. Like, you bring a valid point as it relates to building the relationship and returning the favor, because I know we were talking ahead of time. You come on our show and sharing your expertise, and I think there's a lot of I talk to a lot of brokers, I talk to a lot of business partners out there, a lot of owners in general, and I think we all have the same common mindset of just there's enough out there for everybody, and
there is,
and everybody can experience abundance and success in this industry.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting you use that word abundance. The people that I have come across in my personal and professional life, the ones that come from a place of abundance tend to be a lot more successful than the ones that don't. And the fact is that I view professionals like you, or even other investors, as future partners, not necessarily as competitors. Right. I really don't have any competitors.
Right. Yeah, no, that's a solid point. And I think even so, outside, I actually do a little bit of mentoring as well. And so I actually had a conversation with one of my mentees earlier today, and we kind of had that same conversation of just as it relates to competition. It's like there really isn't any competition, any underlying competition. Like, you have colleagues and you have competing firms and competing brokers, but at the end of the day, there's still business out here for everybody. And it's
absolutely.
Like, once you're going to turn that mindset off, even after rejection and, objections, it's really not that difficult to say, what, today's a new day. Let me try something, different than I did. Maybe the day is the day that something unlocks and, we move forward with something.
Yeah. When I was in sales back a long time ago, I used to play the game of, I knew that I needed to make, let's say 100 phone calls a day. And in that 100 phone calls, I'd find 5 to 10 people that were willing to, have a conversation, and a few of those would turn into deals at some point. And so, I always looked at it as the next person, even if they say no, I'm one person closer to that yes. Right. And I just gamified it. I had to gamify it. Otherwise, a lot of cold callers struggle with the failure concept, right? And you're not failing, you're just getting closer to your success. And it's really hard. Yeah. So let's talk about real estate. So obviously you're highly educated. You've been successful at at a couple of different careers at this point, but you chose real estate as the vehicle to kind of take the next phase of your life, professional life in. And so I'm curious, what was it about real estate that drew you in?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think for me, I'm kind of nerdy when it comes to real estate and pretty obsessed. One of the most simplest things as it relates to real estate is it touches everything, right? So I think that was the most fascinating thing for me, is like, you literally cannot do anything without real estate in its simplest form whether it's you have to park at your office, whether it's somewhere in which you have to live, whether it's your grocery store. Like
Right.
the foundation of what we do on a day-to-day basis starts with real estate. And so looking at it from that aspect, from a market standpoint, there's always going to be a need for a professional. There's always going to be transactions happening. There's always going to be something that impacts the economy, the commodities industry. It's always has a need base. And so, kind of taking my previous skill sets, whether it's, consulting, whether it's project management and stuff like that, and either throwing it into the brokerage side of things or, futuristically into asset management and,
Right.
some few property management aspects. It's like, okay, I can take what I had previous career to, basically triple and quadruple those skill sets, as well as, just a foundation and an impact, on others.
Yeah. Now your firm focuses a lot on retail and multifamily, right? If I have that right.
Yeah, so our team particularly focuses on retail and multifamily, but overall, we have folks in the firm that actually do, specialize in all asset classes. So, a couple of people have business what they do office, industrial. Some I know really just focus on landlord, tenant rep, but we've kind of honed down our niche as multifamily and retail, and then we do a little bit of land here and there where we'll partner with some developers as well.
So obviously I'm a multifamily guy, but I'm curious about the retail part. I want to ask a couple questions about that first. So with COVID, right? Everybody, you read the Wall Street Journal or any of the local papers or whatever, and as we were going through COVID and coming out of COVID, I can't tell you how many articles I read about retail is dead, right? Retail is dead. It's over.
Oh yeah.
And I pay close attention to the retweet guys and gals on Twitter, and I have a lot of folks that I just shoot the breeze with at any given time, and I'm picking their brains. Retail's not dead; they were wrong, right? A lot. So I'm curious, what you're seeing in the marketplace in terms of the opportunity in retail.
Yeah, I mean, the retail is thriving, and it's funny that you said, retail is dead. I was listening to something last week, and they were talking about, the mystery of this retail apocalypse. I'm not really entirely sure where folks have got that, but I mean, like when you talk about national tenants and even local small business, retail has not been in a better position than it currently is. I mean, we've had spaces that can't stay off the shelf. The market rents are probably the best that they are at right now. Like, for example, here in our local market, in our major areas of Charlotte, it's not surprising to see retail rates at $35 a square foot,
Wow.
with $5 in cams. I was actually looking at some space for 2 tenants yesterday, and that's what the listing brokers came back and quoted me at. You see one of the most popular national tenants actually here in Charlotte there is Dunkin' Donut.
Yeah.
You probably see almost as many Dunkin' Donuts as you do Starbucks, and they don't really have a compete clause as it relates to mileage. So I think them, it's like who can get the most, but Dunkin' Donuts and Starbucks are probably take up more space than all the McDonald's and Burger Kings combined here. But you still have a thriving industry for small business. Like Charlotte is a very unique melting pot of not only professionals, but people who want to live here because they still consider it as affordable. Even though, the cost of living has significantly increased over the last couple of years, it's still not in comparison to, New York, Chicago,
Right.
California, Phoenix.
Now
we're probably still on the same level as Georgia, but Georgia's still probably twice the cost of living as it relates to, your standard, middle income family house or whatever the case may be. But at the same time, we don't have that same amount of space. So that's the kind of thing, we probably get the most complaints about traffic and gas prices, but outside of, livability and things of that nature, it's still a thriving city. So I think that's what excites people here. I think the last stat was like 140 something odd people move here a day. So if you do, some math on that, and then the opportunities that lie, it is a great opportunity. I think people are understanding lease structure a lot better, whereas a lot of old operators have converted their modified and gross leases into triple net leases.
Right.
things of that nature. And we're doing a lot of trading. So it's definitely a great time to be in retail.
So let me ask you, just for the benefit of the audience, triple net, when you're talking about that, what exactly are you referring to? Just for
Yeah,
the
absolutely. So
yeah.
a triple net lease is where the tenant itself basically is responsible for everything and in the most simplest form. So what ends up happening is you'll sign a base rate. So let's just say that base rate is, $30 a square foot. And then you'll pay as a tenant a pro rata share of shared expenses. So say if you and 5 other tenants occupy that property, it's called taxes, insurance, common area maintenance, which is short for TICAMs. And basically think of it as if you live in an apartment complex or, a townhome where you guys share an expense of whether it's your outdoor exterior maintenance, signage, parking lot, structural HVAC, where the landlord will cover those major pieces, but you guys are paying into a portion almost like an insurance pool.
Right.
So a lot of times that's probably the one non-negotiable thing on a lease. You can negotiate your base rate, but a lot of times the tie cams have already been spoken for.
Right.
So, think about it as an additional insurance protection, even though it increases your rent amount per month. But at the same time, that also means that you as the tenant are responsible for all your utilities. So sometimes you may see in a modified or gross lease where the landlord will package everything together and say, hey, that's rent, water, electricity, you got to get internet, right? But this is truthfully the cost of doing business. So a lot of times people, newer businesses and small businesses are discouraged by that, mainly because they're like, well, what's the landlord going to do for me? And, in the most respectful way, I let them know, hey, this is still an investment for the landlord who has to make money. So you need a space. If you didn't need a space, they wouldn't be leasing it. And if you feel otherwise, let's go look at you to purchase something. If you're not in a position to purchase, let's get you in that position to what you want to do in the future, and you become the landlord, right? So you got to kind of play that game with folks to let them know and educate them. And then once people kind of figure out, it's like, is this the norm? And they realize it is, they're a little bit more comfortable with signing those papers.
Yeah. So what's the landlord going to do for me? Nothing.
Yeah.
He or she created the building and owns the building and keeps it upright. And your job is to do everything else, right? Pretty much.
Right.
Yeah. All right. So let's talk multifamily. So, one of the things that I've seen in the North Carolina market, particularly in the area kind of where you tend to hunt, tons of development. And so, I'm curious what's driving that. Is that affordable housing? Is that luxury and mid-level housing? It's just, it's mind-boggling how many construction sites there are. I landed so I was down there a few months ago and came in through Charlotte and drove out to Chapel Hill and stopped at a couple of stops along the way. I have family in Chapel Hill and the Charlotte part was business. And so I was dumbstruck with how many construction sites I drove past just in that, it's a long stretch of highway, but it's, I couldn't believe how much construction's going on down there. So what's driving it?
Yeah. So before I answer your question, the running joke in the Charlotte area is we probably have too many apartment complexes and breweries that are going up. But, it's like, okay, well, if you're tired of that, build something else that's more suitable in your mind or what people demand for. Yeah, I'm okay with breweries too. What's driving that though, in truth, is part of it. So maybe not so much affordable housing all the time, but the need for housing in general. So when the pandemic hit, I'm not sure how it was for you in Connecticut, but our housing supply dropped down from roughly 6.7 months to 0.3 months,
Same.
right?
Similar
So we
here.
barely had availability. And so what happened was we were fortunate to where we just have a lot of trees around us. So a lot of people had just been sitting on land for a while. Yep. And then essentially, that bubble kind of just burst where it's like, hey, you got these trees, we need to build these homes. Right. What's it going to take for us to buy? So a lot of developers came in with big bags and said, hey, here you go. We want to buy your land. So that's part of it. And then again, you also have a lot of people of, older generations that are phasing out that are just ready to sell, may not have anything to pass on to them. There's some benefits of the city as it relates to affordable housing, but it kind of goes back to the statistics of the amount of people that are moving here. So you may not be able to build new neighborhoods as fast as you could build, we'll say another 500 to 700 apartment complex unit, especially closer to, our center city, our thriving areas such as South End, and then just some other areas where people want the kind of the walkability and the small neighborhood lifestyle.
Right.
Charlotte is still unique in a space where it's not the biggest of cities, but it's big enough to where when something is built, no matter whether you live center city or you live on the outskirts, everybody wants to kind of feel the same way. So if I can come out of my apartment and, I can walk to Tropical Smoothie, or I can, take a short ride to Publix or Harris Teeter, everybody kind of wants that small neighborhood eat, work, play type feel. So that's what's generated a lot of it. But, I was at an event with CoStar a couple weeks ago, and, one of the things that they were projecting, which you could possibly see through construction, is that you may get to a point in the next couple of years where we may have too much supply, right? So you were trying to combat and be reactive from what happened during COVID to the point where you may have too much supply, and we may see, apartment complexes going back to giving concessions. You may see a little higher vacancy, but Charlotte is such a unique market. They don't project it slowing down. I think it will, kind of be even kill and just feel normalized as it relates to, availability. But, I think it's just one of those things. It's like a wait and see type deal. Because even once the apartments go up, you're like, okay, that was ground level. 6 months later, they have a sign out there now leasing, and they're leasing by building. They're not waiting to finish like the old days, and like half the parking lot still has to be paved and the pool's not built. But it's like, you can live in building 1 on floor 2 and 3. We got to paint 3, but you can move in today. So they're not waiting.
No, they're not waiting. Yeah, that's for sure. So it's interesting because from an affordable housing perspective here in Connecticut, we are, last I read, it was like 26,000 units behind where we needed to be in 2030.
Oh wow.
Yeah. And so I don't know if that's I know that there's 3.5 to 4 million units that we're short over the across the country, but I don't know quite frankly, I don't know what the affordable housing situation is in North Carolina. It looked to me like a lot of that stuff was not workmen's housing, but or affordable housing. It looked like it was normal market level housing.
Right. And I think one of the things too, and I don't know, how it is up north, one of the things that we've struggled with, and we're kind of getting there, but we're still kind of behind, is wages catching up with affordability, right? So whereas, folks from up north, they come down here, and obviously if you've made a certain amount of money or your profession commands a certain type of value, you're going to keep that when you come down here. Like, you're not going to, you don't have to take a pay cut, or if your job transfers or your business transfers, you don't have to worry about that because you're already accustomed to what what value brings to you. But for those, like when we saw a significant increase in the cost of housing, even rent, a lot of people couldn't afford it because, they might be in the same job, or they may have a small raise, but that small raise doesn't equivalent to, the value of housing or the value of, apartments going up.
It's not
30-40%.
Yeah, right on. It's not overcoming the inflation of the housing costs over the last 3 years.
Yeah.
So I'm curious, obviously in the broker business, one of the reasons that I value the brokers that I work with is, every day they're talking to the building owners that I want to talk to, right? And so they get a once a month, they get a postcard or a letter from me, and a couple of phone calls a month from me. But the brokers are the ones that are playing golf with them and taking them out to breakfast and taking them out to lunch and, whatever else. And so, that going back to that Bo Berry thing, one of the things that, brokers are world-class great at is deal flow, right? And so, I'm curious, in terms of your business, how does your firm generate deal flow? Obviously it's the oxygen that keeps you cooking. So what kinds of things are you doing to get the attention of building owners who may be in some time frame thinking about selling their property?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think you hit on a couple of those things right there. So, if we already have an existing relationship, or somebody in our sphere has an existing relationship, a lot of that may be hand to hand, word of mouth, introduction, whether it is coffee, whether it is golf course, dinners, networking events, kind of the typical mantra of getting that face to face. space. But the other classic way is cold calling. So we do a lot of calling, a lot of cold outreach. The benefit of technology and skip tracing now, it allows us to get multiple forms of contact. So whether it's email, whether it's multiple numbers, and just doing outreach that way. I think the biggest thing that I'm always a component of is what value are we going to be able to provide to those that we're reaching out to. I think it's hard to say, hey, I'm reaching out to say, do you want to sell your property? But, at the same time, if you hadn't done any previous research on the property, like, hey, I see you own 15 units. The property down the street sold for, similar, maybe a couple $1 million. Not sure if you knew that. Or just saying, hey, here's what the market's doing. Maybe you're interested in this. Or flip it around. Say, we see you own this. We see you have a portfolio. Are you looking to purchase as well? So hitting it from a few different angles. Also kind of letting people know that we've done business in that area, or, here's some services that we offer that are unique to what we do as a whole, especially in our marketing suite. So one of the things that we pride ourselves very, very wonderfully in is our marketing suite, as well as our negotiation. And a lot of times we also tell people that, hey, we'll evaluate the property, we'll underwrite the property for you. We'll do the dirty work. And afterward, if it doesn't make sense, we're going to tell you it doesn't make sense, because if you have a number in your head that you want to sell it for, but we know it's going to sit, we're not going to waste your time, right? There's no reason to waste everybody else. Whereas I know a lot of people will still take on something just to say they have it, and then just go off the strength of what their client wants them to do. We're blessed in that way. So
that's awesome. So yeah, I mean, EXP as a company has done a really nice job of creating that platform, right? And the fact is that the thing that I heard that I was hoping you would say is that there's no magic wand, right? There's no secret. It's just flat out cold calling, digital marketing, and shaking hands and creating awareness, and ultimately building trust to the point where you're in the right to do business with them, right? That's it.
Right. Right. And I tell new brokers all the time, like, when you get into this business as a whole, it doesn't matter what side of the business you're on, is kind of have an open mind and have an open canvas. Like, you just basically have a blank wall, and start throwing paint at it. And until you come up with this beautiful picture that is your pipeline in your business. And even when it turns out to something you like, do another one, right? Until you feel comfortable that you're going in the right direction and that you actually enjoy what you're doing.
So more Jackson Pollock than Monet or Manet then, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. There you go. I get it. All right. So, one of the things that I'm always curious about is mentors, right? And so, I'm sure you've had your mentors along the way. And so I'm curious about the advice that they've given you, and what is the best advice you ever got, and who gave it to you?
Yeah. So I would say mentorship has been an interesting journey for me. Because even when I got into the business, I didn't have direct mentorship right away. I had probably folks that had been in the business that I picked brains with and stuff like that. But it wasn't probably until I partnered with my current partner, Dwayne, that I got true mentorship. And he has this statement that says cold call cures all. And so it's just one of those things where it's like you can do anything and everything that you want to do, but if that pipeline is dry, pick up that phone and start calling.
Right.
But I think it's just a mindset thing, right? I think outside of that, I think the biggest shift was, going back to the abundance statement of just knowing that there's everything out there for anybody who wants to go get it, and also trying not to compare yourself to everything and everything that everybody else is doing. When I first got into the business, I heard that it takes, 3 to 5 years or, to kind of really get those gears going to where you have a consistent pipeline, where you feel like an expert in the business. And so like, even in the first year, I would beat myself up just like anybody, that I'm just super hard on myself, thinking like, oh man, when is a breakthrough going to happen? When is my deal flow going to be consistent where, I'm closing something every month and things of that nature. But then, what I started to do and change my focus on is when I first got into the business, I was thinking more like a broker. Now I think more like an investor. And so hearing different stories of the journeys that people have taken, like even some of the most successful brokers that I've talked to, had it rough for the first couple of years. And then it was, that breakthrough they had, or, but it was like, okay, what's the work ethic, right? So I'm really big on, when I talk with people, understanding their work ethic, understanding their methodology, and going from there, opposed to saying, well, this person over here drives that nice Porsche. I want a Porsche, but why am I trying to rush to get the Porsche if I'm not putting the work in, right? So it's like trying to put yourself in the mindset of focus, consistency, and discipline, and just work a little bit every day. And so my big thing is, I may not necessarily get a lead every day or write a contract every day, but if I do something real estate related, brokerage related every day, it's like chipping away at that goal, and I feel like something's accomplished. So
get 1% closer to your goal every day, right? I mean, it's just incremental progress, right?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So in terms of how you as they say, sharpen the saw, right? When you're taking in information, I know leaders tend to be readers, right? And so I'm curious about obviously you come from an interesting background in terms of finance, and then moving on from consulting to the real estate world. So I'm curious, obviously a lot of that, yes, a lot of it's classroom taught, but a lot of it's not, right? And so I'm curious about, what kind of stuff, and I say reading because it's just the colloquialism, but the fact is that people these days, they take in information on YouTube and podcasts and audiobooks and physical books and whole host of other ways of getting smarter and sharpening the saw, as they say. So I'm curious, two things really. One is, how do you tend to consume information, right, when you're looking to learn about something? And then I'm also curious about the authors and or creators that you're paying attention to these days.
Yeah. So for me, I guess probably the biggest thing that I consume is podcasts now. I probably listen to more podcasts than I do actual watch TV or anything of that nature. So, a couple ones that I listen to now, like the Commercial Real Estate Academy by Ralph Colazzo. I also listen to CBRE's podcast and Crexy's podcast, because they have different market update as well. When it comes to books, I kind of read a lot of more so leadership and kind of mindset books. So I just read, I just finished the gap the gap in the gain. I forgot the author on that. I have to go. But that one really,
I have to check it out.
Yeah, the gap between the pain. That really teaches you kind of what we're talking about before, when you're kind of evaluating yourself. A lot of us, we always focus on where we're not, right? So, for example, if something happened to you and you didn't really get all the calls that you wanted to get through, but you made 3 or 5, a lot of us will focus on, if the goal was 100, we focus on the 95 that we didn't get. And so we don't, and so we know we got the 5, but we don't show appreciation toward that 5. And so it's really focusing on, celebrating your small wins and, realizing, hey, you actually started something, you did accomplish something, go with that and use that as your momentum moving forward.
Yeah.
So that's, I just started reading Into the Black by T. Dallas. He owns one of the largest commercial real estate firms in Atlanta. And then, I actually had a book come in, TD Jakes actually just recently wrote a book called Disruptive Thinking. So that one is, again, it's a concept book that's focused on, if you want to do something great, or if you say, hey, I want to do this with my life, you can't do it the traditional way. You got to take those risks. So that's something I'm reading now. If I'm not reading real estate books or, reading articles, then I'm huge into sports. So, First Take is probably one of my favorite shows out there right now. I do watch a lot of golf. I think that's more of the calming, just kind of mindset thing. But and then just from an entertainment standpoint, kind of got that balance. So I listen to The Breakfast Club. I listen to Brilliant Idiots and the Flagrant podcast as well. And that creates a balance of just hearing not just, what's going on in different industries, but also people that are working hard as well to accomplish their goals. So a lot of the folks on the radio, studio. People think, oh, there's a lot of stuff is pre-recorded or they just go live. Some of it is, and a lot of it is. But you have people that get up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be in the studio at 5, and are literally working from 5 a.m. to 9 a.m. And then they basically studio hop all day. And these are the same people, kids, families, and stuff like that. So it kind of goes back to what I was saying before as it relates to work ethic. And I'm the type of guy that I think we all get tired. We all kind of have those lazy days, from time to time, and it happens. And I think that's just showing yourself grace. But I'm also the type of guy that I'm not going to make excuses for what I can't do. At the end of the day, I know what I need to do. And I know that I have flaws and weaknesses just like the next person. But I'm not going to sit there and just sit on it and say, you know what, I can't do it. I'll find a way. It may take time to get it done, begrudgingly sometimes. But, at the end of the day, it's, I think, just kind of focus back on your why, and it'll kind of help you get to where you're trying to get to.
And that's tremendous advice, right? Is that, when being clear on your why is so important. I struggle with the same thing, right? I mean, there are days I get up and I'm like, oh man, I just don't want to, not today. Right. But I'm crystal clear on my why. You're obviously crystal clear on your why. And that's kind of the fuel for perseverance. Right. And in terms of being able to say, nope, today's, I've got to go make progress. I got to move that ball, a few yards down the field today. Right. And whether I want to or not, it's got to happen. So, because I have, team members, employees, investors, residents, my family, I got to eat dinner with my board of directors, namely my wife and 2 daughters. And I need to be able to tell them that I got some stuff done today. Right. And so I hear you.
Oh yeah, for sure.
The other thing that one of the themes that I'm hearing in your comments, which is really interesting, is from an abundance perspective, you look at it from a different way in terms of comparisons, right? And I view that as, I'll steal the Nick Saban's term, rat poison, right? Looking at the guy with the Porsche, or the lady with the huge portfolio, or whatever, right? I think if you focus on comparing you to the rest of the world, all it does is slow you down, right? My daughter taught me something a long time ago that I still try to use, and we're all competitive in this business, right? And so she was a competitive swimmer in high school, and she would swim and she would work her butt off, but she wasn't a superstar, right? In fairness, and she would tell you this too. I'm not speaking out of school. But the thing is that I'd be like, I had asked her a question around being competitive, and, doesn't that drive you? And she looked me right in the eye and she said, I couldn't care less if I win the race. I just want to get a little faster. So if yesterday I swam at 35 seconds, I want to swim it in 34 today. Right. And she goes, that's all I care about. I'm like, oh, okay. And it reminded me of, what you were saying in terms of, or what you said reminded me of that story, and that, incrementalism, right? Get a little bit better every day, 1%.
Yeah. I think for me, and I can't remember the moment that it happened. But I think, ultimately, when you get to a point where you feel like you don't have to, I would say, do things for others, right? Like it's one thing to do, like, have your motivation for your family. Like, for example, my wife, my daughter, the people around me that are in my circle, that's one thing. We kind of have our own fun and games, and it's like, yeah, you know what, I'm going to get the bigger car next year. So,
of course.
Catch
but that's
right?
just fun, right?
Right. But I think when you're not doing it for external validation, then there's a whole different thing. So, like, once you kind of figure out what those internal validations for yourself are, that's when, to your point, you're not as worry free, you're not as stress free. Obviously, you want to make sure keep food on the table, keep the lights on, and all that stuff. But you don't feel like you're having to validate yourself to the world by what you drive or what you're wearing. Now, granted, I'm a car guy, and I always have been a car guy. So, I have certain, plans and goals of what vehicles I would like to own.
Yeah.
I'm also a shoe guy. So I have a very vast sneaker collection. But for me, that's part of branding for me as well. So it's not necessarily, I have this, but for the branding purposes, now people know me as, a broker that has sneakers. So they're like, okay, well, what shoes are you wearing today?
Yeah.
Again, that's part of not necessarily a floss, but it's more of a branding and image. So, you kind of be able to set yourself from, oh yeah, I know such and such. That's the guy that always has the sneakers on. So you think about futuristically, how do you position yourself for those conversations, or, when you're you're not in the room with people. So I think that's kind of my aspect on certain things.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, whatever you can do to stand out from your competitors, right? Dialing for dollars, when the phone rings, there's no differentiation, right? Everybody's commoditized at
Oh
the
yeah,
other end of that phone until you make that connection, right? Whatever that is.
absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So Trystan, I've really enjoyed our conversation today, and thank you again for joining us. So I'm curious about a couple other things though before we go. In terms of spending time with your wife and your daughter, and your friends and family, what do you like to do outside of real estate that is fun?
Yeah, I would say probably the biggest thing for me is traveling. Even before so my daughter turns 2 next month, and so like before then, we were big on traveling. We'd probably go somewhere maybe every couple months or so, whether it be a quick road trip, maybe a bigger trip like once a year.
Yeah.
But I think we're just natural explorers, and so I have some conferences I'm going to this year in different places. So one of the things that once we had our daughter, I was like, I know some people frown upon it, some people are not for it, but I'm like, I would rather her travel with us or with me or whatever the case may be, so she can see what we see. Obviously, the flip side of that is now you have to go everywhere with a toddler, but I mean, it doesn't bother me. I kind of embrace it. Of course, we'll still need our alone time, and we have things set up for that, but
Sure.
that's probably my biggest thing. We love food, so I'm always trying out different restaurants. During the pandemic, I started collecting bourbon. I was already drinking bourbon before, but I started collecting things. But like I said, then sports is probably the biggest thing. So sports, it doesn't matter for the most part. I'm not the biggest in hockey, but every other sport I'm pretty good on. And again, that's kind of really, I'm pretty simple. I used to game. I ran out of time for that. I have the systems.
Right.
They probably collect just as much dust as my
Right.
ceiling fans.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, and then when I can, spend time with friends and family that are in my circle. A lot of my brothers, they're entrepreneurs. Some travel for work, some are local. And so, a lot of times it to be like 3 or 4 months, and then it's like everybody's in town at the same time. So we kind of drop everything and get together. And then I'm heavily involved in my fraternity. So I'm a member of Phi Beta Sigma, and I actually serve on our local executive board as the first vice president. So I have quite a few responsibilities with that here in Charlotte, and then a couple other boards that I sit on. So
okay, so you're on all these boards, you're a broker, you're a family man. You like to when do you sleep?
I mean, I do get sleep probably between the hours of 2 and 7.
Right.
But I would probably say that's probably my biggest weakness is not going to bed. Is like it's like somehow, shape, or form, you'll get tired and then you catch a second wind, and then my brain will keep going. But I'm working on better balancing that out. I recently kind of changed my diet a little bit. Like I've never been bad at dieting, but I noticed like, maybe incorporating more yogurt, more water, more probiotics in the morning that'll have, a longer lasting kind of natural energy throughout the day.
Yeah, right on.
But yeah,
I find the same
quote.
Oh, go ahead. You heard a quote?
Yeah, no, I was saying I found some people believe that you should sleep, some people believe that you shouldn't, but I think it's just more so one of those things you just kind of find the balance of what works for you.
Yeah, but I'm wired similarly to you. If I'm in bed at 10, I sleep through the night, right? And I get up around 5:30ish. But if I don't go to bed, if my eyes aren't closed by about 10:15, I'm up till 2. Like I get that second
right.
The to-do list starts cooking, and yeah, I'm the exact same way. So, well, hey, Trystan, thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to see you. And once we hit the pause button on this record, I'm gonna hit you up for your deals that you have cooking down in your neck of the woods. But so in the meantime, Trystan McNeill from Heigh Capital Group, thank you so much, and it's really good to see you, my friend.
Thanks, Ed. I appreciate you having me on the show.
Yeah, likewise.
This has been the Real Estate Underground podcast. Thank you so much for listening. Don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe. It helps us grow. Until next time, happy investing.